The U.S. Congress has begun a 60-day period of debate on the Iranian nuclear deal. It kicked off with a U.S. Senate briefing in Washington that featured speakers including former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman and former CIA Director James Woolsey. Moderating the panel was Ambassador Mitchell Reiss, the former Director of Policy Planning at the State Department. Ambassador Reiss joins us now from the U.S. Capitol in Washington. Mr. Ambassador, welcome back to the broadcast. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sir, the name of the panel was called Blocking Iran's Pathways to the Bomb. Is it your contention and the contention of others who spoke today that the deal that was negotiated between Iran and the world powers does not do that?
Well, I won't speak for the other panelists, but I think that there are a number of very serious questions and concerns that arise out of the text that has been released so far. Especially concerning compliance, verification, and the ability to reverse course should Iran be caught cheating.
Should Iran be caught cheating? So is this about trust, or is it about transparency?
Well, no international agreement, in my experience, has ever been about trust. As President Reagan famously said, trust but verify, with the emphasis on verify. It has to be about transparency. And the greater challenge for the United States and for our allies and friends around the world is how do you elicit transparency from a regime that has been a master at cheating and retreating on its nuclear program for more than a decade. Never mind all of its other very troublesome activities in the region supporting terrorism and terrorist groups more broadly.
Mr. Ambassador, the United States does deal with some other countries, some other nations that could be considered rogue in their thinking, the way they treat their own people, the way they treat their neighbors. Why does this deal with Iran, why does that make such a difference from some of the other countries that we have dealings with?
Well, in theory, it doesn't. I've actually written a book on negotiating with terrorist groups around the world after I left the State Department. I think the difference here is really the dimensions of the issue having to do with nuclear weapons and the sense that the agreement doesn't curtail Iran's nuclear weapons ambitions, but rather places it on hold for a limited period of time while empowering them, indeed enriching them, with the means to spread and destabilize, spread terror and destabilize allies and friends of ours in the region. So it is significantly different from some of the other agreements and other bad actors that we've negotiated with over the years.
Sir, do you have confidence in our intelligence agencies that they will, as the president said, be able to keep eyes on the Iranians and to find out if, in fact, they are living up to this agreement, whether or not they're cheating?
Well, it's funny you should ask that question because that was one of the first questions that was asked the panel. And the answer by the most senior IAEA inspector on the panel was that it really depends. It depends on the scope of the cheating. Not every facility is going to be as large as the one we saw at Natanz or Fordo. Some of them can be quite small, and given the size of Iran and given the delay that is mandated by this agreement of up to 24 days before the inspectors will be allowed to visit a site, I think there should be real concerns about our ability to monitor compliance.
Sir, you mentioned President Reagan just a moment ago. If historical context means anything, the threat to the United States from the former Soviet Union was greater. And we did make a deal with them on nuclear weapons, on nuclear arms, the START Treaty and such. Could you give me a historical parallel between that and what's going on now and how the United States was able to, if you will, keep eyes on the Soviets and make sure that they were not cheating?
Sure, you're absolutely right, is that the threat from the Soviet Union was far greater than it is from Iran. But there was a symmetry to the negotiation with the Soviet Union. We each had nuclear weapons. If the Russians cheated, we could go back outside the constraints of the agreement and build more nuclear weapons. I think with Iran, it's an asymmetric type of threat. And therefore, we need to have a broader strategy towards curtailing or constraining Iran's behavior in the region. President Reagan never deviated from his belief that the Soviet Union was an evil empire. He spoke out continuously about human rights, religious freedom, and the dignity of the individual, especially in places like the Soviet Union where people didn't have the blessings of America's freedom. So here, I'm waiting to hear from the administration what the larger policy is, supporting those people inside and outside of Iran who want a democratic, representative Iran that respects the dignity and human rights of its own people and believes that it should live at peace with its neighbors. We haven't seen that from the Obama administration so far.
Mr. Ambassador, is it your contention then that perhaps maybe we should go back to the drawing board and rip this deal up? If you were negotiating this deal, what would you like it to see? What do you want in it?
Well, I think that all of us who have been in similar circumstances understand that it's always easy to negotiate in the abstract. And the fact is that there are always ways in which any deal can be strengthened. For this one, I think the compliance measures really are the eyesore for me when I look at it. I think also the limited time period, 8 years for some items, 10 years for other items in terms of restraining the Iranian behavior. So I'd like to see Iran have no nuclear weapons capabilities. That was the policy of the Bush administration. Whether that can be achieved or not, we don't know. But I do think that there are some things that Congress is going to have to examine and make a decision as to whether or not they can support this agreement.
Sir, we have less than 30 seconds left. Is it your belief then that this is a bad deal, and does it threaten U.S. national security?
I think it's a flawed deal. And again, I'd like a little bit more time to examine it, especially to hear the testimony of the experts and personally to get access to some of the secret documents and sidebar agreements that are part of this agreement before I can make a full assessment. But again, I think that Congress needs to play its constitutional role and review this agreement very carefully.
Mitchell Reiss, the former director of policy planning at the U.S. State Department, joining us after helping to lead that forum today on Iran and the nuclear developments there. Mr. Ambassador, always a privilege to have you on the broadcast. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.